Welcome to Liftoff. I guess the technical lecture series, maybe there are two different series, maybe there are one. But the first of 8 classes that I'll be lecturing. This will be fun. This will be a bit of a different pace. In my mind, this will be pretty discussional. A lot of the content we'll be covering has a certain degree of subjectivity to it. You know, with syntax, most of the time either it works or it doesn't. Unless there's a weird issue going on. But when we're talking about ideas like collaboration or how to manage a project and just these larger scope things, we start getting into some of the subjective concepts, right? So what we'll be covering this evening is project scope. It's going to be really important because we got to figure out how to scope these projects we're about to build in a way where it is both going to be something really cool when we're done with it, and also something that we will be able to complete within the time frame. We're going to talk about MVP. You're going to hear that phrase a lot from me. And then also project flow. And so there's a lot to that one. I won't get into it yet. So first concept is the project scope. So later today, you will choose a project to build as a group. We'll need to define what MVP looks like, more on that later. And it's important to remember, can't stress it enough, that we only have a month and a half roughly to complete these projects. So we'll need to pick features that are appropriate for that time frame. It's really easy to dream big. So yeah, so features that we can complete in that time frame. This is probably the right way to put it. So what's a feature? You've heard me say the phrase feature now a couple times. You've probably seen it come up elsewhere. A feature is a specific functionality or characteristic of a software product that addresses a user need. It's a specific functionality or characteristic of a software product that addresses a user's need. So an example of that is a radio is a great feature to have in a car. If you ever driven a car without a radio, it's kind of a bummer. The car still works, but it'd be nice to have the feature of the radio. Brakes are also nice to have in a car. And I mention that because in my brain, when I think of features, I think of like nice to have things. But when we're talking software, it's the nice to have things and it's the must have things. Everything's a feature. So brakes are a feature, the engine's a feature, the radio's a feature. So here's some of the example features. So feature 1 is the ability to log in. So a user can create and log into a website that you are presumably building. Let's say this is an e-commerce type of a website. So another feature may be shopping. So a user can purchase products from the website. It's an important feature. Another feature might be product reviews. We see this on a lot of sites nowadays, like Amazon. So a user can review products, edit and delete the reviews. And then another feature might be an admin page. So this is not really for the users of the website. This is for the people running the website, and so they can see a summary of the current inventory and sales. So I'll pause here as I normally do. Has this inspired any questions or thoughts up to now? Yes?
What's the count on features being had? Is it 3 to 5? Or is it specifically?
I believe that it is 3 to 5. I don't know off the top of my head. It's probably important to get confirmed. You know what's more important is the overall final product that you're building. But yeah, I believe 3 to 5 features, that rings true for me. It depends upon the size of them too. Yes?
I feel like I always build too big. You have a good method to try and make sure. Because I don't know how long something would take. I don't have the idea. I've done that before. It would take 2 weeks to implement.
Right. How are we going to accurately estimate how long something's going to take? Yeah, we will talk about that a bit. I'll give you a few strategies up front. So one strategy is when you as a team are going over the different tasks that you're going to be working on, called user stories. We'll learn more about user stories in the lecture. But when you're going to accomplish a user story, as a team, you can collectively estimate it. So what I see done a lot of times is they'll just do like a blind vote where everyone says, hey, I think this is going to take about 1 day's worth of effort or 5 days or whatever. And then if someone is thinking, oh, this is going to take a week, and one person's saying this is going to take a day, then you can discuss it a bit more. But if everyone's in agreement, hey, this is going to take 4 days of work or something like that, that's what you'll estimate it as. Generally speaking, you can always probably add a bit more time to your estimation. You're usually erring on being overly optimistic in my experience at least. So that's one strategy. The other strategy, I mean, I don't know if this is really strategy, but it's really helpful to lean on experienced developers, get their take on tasks, what it entail. Because we do have the unknown unknowns that can make a project take a task take longer. So just getting their take on it is really helpful. Because if you never have it done before, it's really hard to estimate it correctly. So generally speaking, add more time on it, collectively estimate things, and then get the more experienced developers take on it. Cool. Any other thoughts? Yes?
Do you know the exact date we have to be done with this?
The exact date. Two important questions that you don't have off the top of my head. Alexi, yes. So the two questions is it specifically 3 to 5 features, and then the exact date that this must be done by the projects. Sorry.
So features-wise, it's 2 to 3 features per person. Date-wise, your project really needs to be finished by the end of week 7. I don't have the specific date on that, but there's one break week, and I think, no, I don't want to tell you the wrong date. It's week 7.
Thanks. Yes.
I think it's supposed to be for Betsy. Is there a sheet or the requirements for a project somewhere that we can reference?
Can you repeat the end of that?
Is there something that we can reference for the requirements for the project?
Yeah, I can work with Melinda to get that sent out to y'all by the end of this week. Yep.
Cool.
Any other, yep.
So you said 2 to 3 per person, so that's 10 to 15?
Yes.
Let me get my draw off before.
So
So could 2 people be working on the same feature?
yeah, there are pieces that are probably gonna be big enough that are enough for both people. The reasoning behind that is because we wanna make sure that each person that works on the project has something direct to talk about. And so when Nicole touched on this a little bit last Thursday, but essentially when you're moving into the apprenticeship program, you wanna also be setting yourself up for success to be able to talk to company partners about the features that you built for a particular project, which is why each person is responsible for 2 to 3 features. I promise it's not as stressful as it sounds, because when we were doing individual projects, each person was responsible for the entire project as opposed to a piece of one. I saw a hand up over here. Yes?
Yeah, I would like to kind of know if there's a process that we should be aware of. So I used to be project manager. Part of the process would be you have to have user stories before you start actually determining features or whatever it is in the program, and then you take the next step. So is there something you have laid out? Because I don't know if I should go home tonight and program for 20 hours, or should I wait till we talk about user stories so I know what I'm doing? So there's a process component of how you want us to work through this.
Yep, so you'll actually be going through that with TAs during studio time, so we do have that mapped out for y'all. It's not just gonna be go do a thing. There is gonna be pieces that you'll talk about in small groups. Yes?
When we talk about features, does that mean each controller be able to, how a lot of projects, we have 3 to 5 different controllers, we have multiple different HTML, front ends, are all those individual things considered features, or would, where is the breakup between this is a feature?
Yeah.
Not?
I'll discuss about like scoping features, like how big they should be, as we progress through this lecture. So we will talk about that, about the appropriate size for them. It is subjective, but yeah, we'll discuss that a bit more.
If it's subjective, what qualifies as a feature for this project?
I'll give an example of something that is too big or too small, and something that's in the middle. So the thing is, like, if you're saying, like, okay, I want to build a car, like, what do you consider a feature? It can be subjective in itself. Like, for example, if you're considering like a car needs to be street legal as a feature, well, let's say there's like one certification has to meet, which requires like safety, like a safety like level, or just the emission level. Well, that could probably be broken down to, instead of just saying it's the overall needs to be street legal, maybe a better feature would be it needs to pass like a safety inspection. And so it will take a bit of just probably discussion to really like scope out the feature size appropriately. But yeah, generally speaking, yeah, and it's difficult to be like a black and white answer, like this is the size of the feature, because it's gonna be goal based, and then also based on like realism. So like two to three features, if it's two large features, then that's what it would be. If the features seem a little more smaller chunks, I don't know if that makes sense. We'll definitely discuss it more. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions for Lexi? Well, let's see this up here. Rapid fire text messages. Thanks, Lexi. Appreciate it. Yeah, features, scoping features. We're going to discuss that a bit more. Which brings us to our next slide, which is feature size. So, how big / how small should a feature be is hard to answer. I saw something over a little bit. Social networking feature. Let's say we're building a website. Like, hey, it'd be really cool if this had like a social networking feature. That sounds great up front, but when we think about what could be as part of this, we might need things like user profiles, a commenting system, liking, the ability to share something, user-generated content moderation. At that point, it is so obvious this is too big to be considered a feature. An example of something that's definitely obviously too small to be a feature would be like a banner that welcomes users onto the website. And so something that I would consider just right as far as that feature size would be a comment section where users can like write, edit, and delete comments. And I would actually put this at just that. If we were to go a bit further and say like you can reply to comments and you can like comments and things like that, that might be making the feature a bit larger than it needs to be. And that can definitely be effective. Like you could have like version 1 where we just make a commenting system, and then version 2 where we make an advanced commenting system. And so we're going to talk about scope creep here in a minute, but right on the feature size slide here. So what are y'all's thoughts on what might be a good feature? Let's just start with some ideas of what might be, based on what we discussed, what do you think might be a good feature description or an example of a feature? Yes?
Light and dark mode?
In dark mode? Yes. So, yes, I can see that being a feature, especially if it was, yeah, I mean, depending on how complex it would be. So one way I think about, and this is sort of like the question behind the question. One way I think about a feature is like, is what I did so simplistic that it wouldn't make sense to discuss with like a potential employer or whatever. So let's say hypothetically the way we solved the light dark mode thing was by installing a third-party tool, and it was like 3 lines of code to set up because they did all the work for us. I wouldn't be super comfortable with that being a feature because like if you were to then discuss, hey, look at this thing I built, it doesn't really, it's like I just installed something, However, if in order to implement light / dark mode, it requires like a lot of code changes, a decent amount of effort. where you can say, hey, look at how I built this in an interview or something like that, then yeah, that's definitely a feature. Yeah, so, yeah, generally speaking, like, in terms of like what I would consider definitionally a feature, that would be a feature. In terms of being like part of like the 2 to 3 features, yeah, as long as it's something that you can say that you built and you worked on, yeah. Yeah, I think where we can get tripped up with this a little bit is like there's sort of 2 definitions we're dancing around with. One is just like what's a feature with quotation marks, to be very broad, and then there's like what is enough effort and enough things that we can talk to be that part of the 2 to 3 features that would be, you know, substantial enough to talk to potential employer about, like, hey, what, you know. Right. Other thoughts of something that might be a feature? Yes.
Search box.
Search box, that's a really good one. Yeah, search box is a great example of feature, and that is something that, yeah, I like that. Other examples? Yes. A login function? Yeah. Oh yeah. So like to be able to create an account and then be able to log in. Yeah, it has like one feature, right? Yeah. Behind you? Oh, you're gonna say okay, cool. Yes.
Would using traditional username and password, authentication, and along those lead to one of the 2 features?
Right. So from personal experience, implementing OAuth is a very big lift. So as it typically is. So I would say a basic login functionality, similar to what we did in the course, I consider that a feature. I would lean towards saying, like, if you had that implemented and then you expanded it, like the 3 factors, implement OAuth, and implementing OAuth is a large feature itself. Yeah. Just security stuff can become a rabbit hole. But yeah. Yes.
With creating a database that's placed on like in the cloud versus like what all we did was like on our laptops.
Okay.
So like if you're building a big update with the website that you can interact with, you're wanting to store things in a database that they can search or whatever.
Okay.
Just putting it in the cloud, like figuring that part of it, is that too big of a?
Yeah. So this is when we start getting to the category of things, quote unquote DevOps. So the fuzzy line here is a little bit less to do with how the application works and what we're able to do with it, and more to do with like how it is deployed. I would consider deploying the site, the application, the full stack. I would consider that a feature. It would be a substantial feature, but it would be a feature. So for example, instead of just communicating with a database in the cloud, the application would also be running in the cloud. You know, it would be a deployed application. That's a great goal to have for once your application is reached MVP or is featured that you've got all those critical pieces there. It's probably when I start thinking about, hey, it'd be really cool if we actually have this running out there on the internet, as opposed to just on our laptops. Yes.
I guess there's a follow-up question. As far as interacting with database, is that beyond the scope of what should be for our project?
I would imagine that all of the projects that we build will interact with the database. Because, yeah, to make something that doesn't have any persistent info feels a bit lightweight to me. So, similar to like the applications we built towards the end of Unit 2 for basically reading and writing to the database, I would imagine pretty much everything that we're going to be building is probably going to do that. Yeah. Great question. Other thoughts about what a feature, an idea of what a feature may be, or questions on what we discussed? Yes. Making the website mobile friendly be a feature. That's what you mean by that, right? So there's like an easy, I don't want to say sloppy, but like a low effort version of that feature where it's like use Bootstrap, and it sort of has some responsiveness built into it, and so it basically means that when you use the website online, you shrink down the window, or you open up on a phone, you shrink down the window, things sort of scale, you know? That's not quite a feature that would be really like worthwhile, not worthwhile, but like impressive to talk to people about, like, hey, use Bootstrap, and look, it's mobile responsive. So I think it depends on the scope of what you would mean by making it mobile responsive. I think if you have really advanced with it, you're doing a cool feature, especially if you include things like accessibility. There's a whole, Google has some really good literature on accessibility with websites and stuff like that. So that's really getting into the more, when I would think it would really meet the threshold for a feature, for this 2 to 3 feature conversation, is also sort of when maybe the critical components of the app are built. Because strategically, when we're building an application, getting into like the nitty-gritty of perfecting the UI and how it works and stuff like that, or deploying it out there on the cloud. Those are all things that to me make more sense when like the core functionality of the app is there. And so if that's something you really wanted to do and to get into, I recommend that as like a third task, you know? Because it could be really fun to really research like Google, they talk about the UI, UX, accessibility, all those sort of things. It's really great things in the website. But I'd probably, practically speaking, you want a lot in place before going too far down that road. Yeah. Yes?
What about the ability to pay someone? Like, is that too much?
Right, so let's look at this shopping feature real quick. So with the shopping feature, my mind, what I consider adequate for a feature is the user is able to, you know, select an item, purchase an item, and that purchase is added to the database, and it's subtracted from, as like a purchase item in the database, and it's subtracted from the inventory, like things happening in the background. A more advanced version of that is where you're actually handling payment information, and that would be a larger feature, I think, if you're actually handling payment information. But I think for creating sort of an app that demonstrates like functionality stuff, yeah, the small version of that feature is, you know, you prove that it works, and you go through the flow, it's added to the database. The advanced version is you're implementing some sort of external tool for processing payment information, like I'm sure Shopify and all these different things have different things you can implement. Yeah, cool. Good question. We'll probably keep the conversation going. I'm going to talk about scope creep real quick. I think it's super relevant. It's something I didn't realize was a big deal when I was first starting off as a developer. A lot of the importance of these concepts gets really ingrained when working on projects and then starting to realize, well, there's a deadline, you're going to need it, and you get closer to the deadline or whatever. So scope creep is the gradual expansion of a project's goals. So why should we care about scope creep? A few quotes. It always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. That is Hofstadter's law. I believe this. So there's a really interesting report called the Chaos Report, this Danish group. In 2020, they released their report. I don't know how often they do this, but it's usually big news when they do. So 66% of software projects fail, according to a survey. There's a lot of things that go into that. There's a lot of challenges to developing software. Maybe funding runs out, maybe the project wasn't estimated correctly in terms of time periods. Maybe someone built something that was better. In thinking about the commercial world, like if you were making a tool for doing really cool panoramas or whatever, and then Apple decides to integrate it natively in your phone, well then, if they beat you to it, your project sort of fails. So there's a lot that goes into this number, but it's a very real number that I want to emphasize that there are some pitfalls we want to avoid as we're going into lastly, this one is very real to me. The first 90% of the code accounts for the first 90% of the development time. That's fair. The remaining 10% of the code accounts for the other 90% of development time. If you do the math, those are some fun numbers. Why I believe this quote rings true to me is because it's easy to save the more challenging tasks for last. It's also easier. There's just a lot of things that go into estimating that just makes this thing just feel really weird. It's enough that has its own Wikipedia page for this quote. Okay, so back to scope creep, the whole topic that introduced this. So we're going to consider these 4 features and then discuss what scope creep might look like for each of them. So feature 1, a website must allow users to create an account and log in. Okay, so I'm a developer, I'm going to implement this feature. So I start off by thinking, okay, I'm going to need a controller that allows me to post my create new account. I'm going to need a controller for the login screen. I'm also going to need to build a UI for this, like a login page. But then, like thinking about it, the website has different types of users as a project manager, so I want to implement different roles. And I've already crossed the red line. I'm scope creeping all the way to the right here. This is a metaphorical red line of when I'm definitely scope creeping. And so because we have different users and different project managers, I also might want to make the nav bar so it only shows certain resources based off of whether or not the person can access it. And pretty much I'm way out of the scope of what's reasonable. That's very problematic, but it's easy to do. It's easy to do. It's easy to get motivated, which is a good thing. We need motivation. But we need to, I'd like to encourage you to, when we decide on sort of the parameters of what we want to build, to first implement this core feature that we'd like to do, and then save the like expanded line for later. One way I see this a lot. So I'm a very visual, leaning towards creative person, and so when I build stuff for the web, I want to make it look really good, and just like the user experience and all of that. So I really want to over-invest in that, and so I might be building something simple, and then I end up, an extra 3 days on it because I'm making it interact really good. It would make a lot more sense from a project management perspective, a time management perspective, for myself as a developer, just to build this basic feature and then save making it really cool and fun to interact with, like the whole UX stuff for later. So that might be one way to think about it. So we won't do all these examples, but let's do another one. So the user must be able to purchase products, not projects, that are associated with their profile. So I need to be able to purchase them with my profile. Okay, so over at the left here, what I'm developing is I'm going to make it so there's a controller for the various components that allow me to post purchase requests, and that is going to update the inventory of the database. I'm getting really close to this line when I'm starting to think about the checkout feature, because I can make this checkout feature advanced, or I can make it very simple. Where I really start to cross the line, depending on what we've discussed, it might be deciding I'm going to implement Shopify and PayPal and all these other different credit card processing things. And because I've done all of that, I'm going to need to change the security for our application. So I'm also going to implement OAuth, yada, 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 and I'm way over here. So in terms of scope creep, just something to be aware of. While we're thinking about it, questions or thoughts on this concept? Okay, cool. Hopefully you think of these little scary acting ghosts when you're working on your stories. Another concept is MVP. So we've said it a couple times, depending on your background, you may be familiar with the term, may not be. MVP stands for minimal viable product. So MVP is going to be the version of our apps that have the bare minimum features in order to be considered complete. I think of MVP as like a functional prototype, you know? It's not just a concept, you're able to work with it, interact with it. So discussion, is this an MVP of a car? What do you think? Would you consider this an MVP of a car? No.
Depend on how you're defining the car.
Depends on how you're defining the car. Yeah. Other
Like, are we
thoughts?
trying to drive this on the interstate? Or?
Yeah, this is not MVP if you're going on the highway. So right, it depends. It depends on what you consider minimally viable. So we have the whole idea like street legal, does it need to accommodate multiple passengers, right? So, you know, if you're a family of 4, even if it's street legal, it's not working for you. How fast does it need to go, right? So let's think about a different example. In this case, we're going to start off with some defined MVP features. So we need to build a house, and the 3 features it's going to have is it must provide shelter from wind and rain. It must have an entrance, and it must be secure. So I'm thinking some way to be able to lock this building up. So as us, the building developer, we need to decide how we're going to build this and what it's going to look like. So we have different examples of what this house would look like after we implement these 3 features: provide shelter from wind and rain, have an entrance, and be secure. Which one of these do we feel like best meets the MVP definition?
The shed.
The shed. That's not a shed, that's a house. Yes, right. As a developer, I really want to build this one right here, right? It looks like a house. You know, this is the MVP for a house. We're trying to build a house here, so I really want to build this as a developer. But unlike building houses, building things with code is an iterative process. We can do things in stages. We can easily start off with something like a shed, and then turn it into this, and then turn it into this. Unlike building a house where you have to kind of start up front with your entire design laid out for you. We can do this thing iteratively. And so, right, the green shed, the green house is the MVP based off of this set of definitions. So we're going to switch gears here, talk about project flow and collaboration, things like that. So we're definitely going to be transitioning away from thinking about scope creep, MVP, size of user stories. We have one last chance for questions or comments on that whole section of thinking before we totally change context. Any other thoughts or questions about scope creep, time management, project management, features, feature sizes? Cool, we will press on. So we've been using Git. We've been using it in some way. You might be using terminal to run your Git commands. You might be using IntelliJ. So it has sort of a UI for Git. There's also Git type UIs that you can do that are standalone. Not sure how you're interacting with Git, but we've all been doing it. And so up until this point, I think for most of us, Git is sort of like a Dropbox or Google Drive for our code. It's a place, at least GitHub is, it's like a place in the cloud where our code lives. So we push the code up to the cloud, it lives there, and then we can share it with our TAs and stuff, grading or whatnot. So we're going to have to change our Git workflow because we're going to be working as teams. And this is a huge skill. This is something that, for myself, if I was in a hiring position at a company, I'd be excited to see that a candidate had worked with other developers on a technical project. Solo development is great, but it's a whole skill set to be able to work with other developers. And it's a skill set that everyone really needs in the professional world, in my opinion, as a software developer. So here's an example of sort of the flow that I'm making some assumptions here, but that I believe generally that we've been following here. So the first step is we'll write code. And this assumes we already have our project cloned on our machines, and we have that part set up. We're just gonna write code to meet the assignment, to do whatever we're doing. Then we'll commit, save the changes that we've made to our code. So we might run a few commands like git status just to see the changes. May or may not run that. Git add to stage the changes. This is just getting them ready to save. And then git commit to commit the changes, to save the changes. And then finally, once we've done those various steps, then we may push the changes up to GitHub, up to our sort of remote repository for these things. So generally speaking, not a lot of thought or effort really goes into the branch we're on. Maybe you've practiced some, using like various branches for your work. I know we've had to check out different branches for certain studios and whatnot. But generally speaking, it's this flow. We write code, we commit code, we push code up to the real repository, and so on and so forth. So because we're working as teams, we're going to change this up. So here is an illustration of more of a collaborative approach. So starting in GitHub, with our team project, we're going to create a new branch. Okay? This is going to be the branch that you, the developer, are going to be working off of to implement a story, a user story. Your branch may not be implementing the entire feature. It might be just implementing a portion of it, but it's going to be a chunk of what you're working on. It's going to be associated with this branch. So we create a branch, step one. Step two, we're going to check out this branch on our computer. Okay, so you can technically create the branch locally on your computer. I recommend just creating it from GitHub. It removes a step, makes the workflow go a little bit smoother. So we create the branch in GitHub, we pull the branch down, we check out the branch, and then we write our code. Okay? So some extra steps before we start writing code. We'll, as always, commit changes. So git status, git add, git commit, just staging and saving those changes. Staging, the way to think about it is like just choosing what files you want to save, what files you want to commit. So we might not want to save all of our changes, but yeah. And then finally, once we have written our code, committed our code, we are going to push code up to the remote repository. Once our code's done, it's up in the remote repository, the last step that kind of finishes this all out is we will open a pull request. You'll hear people call it a merge request as well. We'll open a pull request, and with a pull request, we've probably never seen one. That's a great conversation. We will, I'll show you what one looks like. Conceptually, what a pull request is, it is you, the developer, or someone else, the developer, saying, hey, I have some code that I wrote, and I think it's ready to be added to the main application. And so then it gives the other developers a chance to look at your changes, your proposed changes, and say, hey, this looks good, but I have a question about this block of code. Or, hey, when I run this on my machine, it's not working, it's broken. Or, this is great, but maybe we could try a different solution. There's a lot of different conversation that can happen once you're reviewing code. I know it's a new thing right now, but it's a flow that hopefully will be in the rhythm of as we start getting into our projects. So this is a little comment down here, never push to main. And so the way we're not going to ever push our code changes to main on a collaborative project is by using this branching strategy. So we're not just going to be writing code on the main project, we're going to be branching off of it, writing code, and then pulling the branch into the project. All right, so questions on this new flow, thoughts, concerns? Yes?
What if somebody pushes to main and screws everyone's code up? Is there a way to retrieve it? To retrieve like the last iteration?
Yeah, Git does not have an undo command that everyone who pushes it does. However, yeah, there are ways to revert changes. A way we can prevent developers from accidentally pushing to main is that we can protect that branch. So there's a setting in GitHub that will allow us to lock it down. Yeah, and that's super useful. Yes?
Quick question. I know in IntelliJ you can create a new branch in IntelliJ and check it out there. Is that reason to not do? Like always start from GitHub?
I mean, if it works for you to do it that way, that's good. Especially if, yeah, I mean, because IntelliJ will do a lot of the commands for us in the background. If you're like me and you're writing all your Git commands in the terminal, there's like an extra step. But yeah, I would say just find what works for you, what you're comfortable with as a developer. Yeah.
I know like working on open source projects, there's a list of like authorized people that can approve your pull requests. How's that gonna work working like with all of us in the team? Like are we all gonna be able to merge pull requests, but like you just wanna be able to approve your own? So is there a way to set that up like that in GitHub or?
Right, so the question was, looking at other open source projects, there are restrictions on who can and can't approve and merge pull requests. The question was really, well, what about our own teams? Are we going to have similar restrictions? These restrictions are going to be up to you as the team to define, because all of the settings, as far as like restricting who can and who can't, it's really just going to be up to y'all. I would recommend that everyone on your team can approve a pull request, a merge request. And I would also recommend that you have a general requirement that at least one person reviews code and approves it before it's added to the main code base. That's my recommendation. On the team I currently work on, we require at least 2 approvals. I'm going to recommend one for y'all based off of just the case that you'll be working at. Yeah. And then as far as who's allowed to merge it in, generally speaking, it's best if the developer who wrote the code is the one that merges it in. But this is just more of a heuristic as how we're going to approach this. How your team approaches it should be flexible and up to y'all. That's the flow I recommend. Yeah. Cool. Any questions? Other questions? No? Okay. So we'll see how this goes. We're going to talk about stand-up and what that is in the whole agile flow. But I'm going to sort of demonstrate it without explaining it. So let's say I'm developer A. I'm an intern on the project. This is like a corporate project. We're building Time Travelers Boutique. It's like an online shopping place for time travelers exclusively. And so Time Travelers Boutique, I'm an intern. I'm brand new to the project. And so hey guys, so I am new here, I'm an intern. I'm still getting the project pulled up. I'm still figuring out, I'm having an issue, right? Like getting the project to run. And so what I've worked on so far is I've been reading the documentation and then trying to get the project to start. I have a blocker that I can't get it to run. Developer 2, I like UI. So, hey, everyone, I've been working on writing just the basic nav bar for the websites. I haven't made much progress yet. I just got started here, yesterday. And then mentioned the intern, hey, I'd be happy to help you with your issue with the issue writing the application. And then I'm developer 3, maybe I'm more API focused. So, hey, yesterday I basically created this Spring. I used the Spring initializer to create the initial code for the application. Today, I am working on adding getting started on creating the login controller. And then no blockers for me right now. I do have a pull request out that y'all can review. So that was a rough sort of illustration of what a stand-up might look like for a team. Very informal, very short, and we'll talk more about what that entails later. So here's an example of a pull request. All right, so this is the Time Traveler Boutique project, and we will see, there's a lot. There's a lot in this UI. Just want to acknowledge that. But we see up here at this top level navigation bar, we have a section called pull requests. I will call them merge requests all the time, because GitLab calls them merge requests, and that's what I'm familiar with. But we have a pull request, and we see that we have one open, and it's the logo and feature descriptions. And so, I would like to review these changes, and to, just to see if they make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and put on files changed. Notice that there is a nav bar that is local to this page, and then the upper nav bar and then pull requests. And so I can see here on the left side in red, this is what's been changed or deleted or removed or changed. And then the right side in green is new additions. So I can see here that this suggested code changes to remove the hyphens or right here with dashes and to just make the title a little bit better. And then there's an image that was added, it looks like, and then there's a description of the MVP features. This might not be the best place to document what the features are. This might make a lot more sense to put into like a project management site or into GitHub's project management tools. And so I always overthink my comments on pull requests for this in life. It's like, these are great, positive, right? What if we moved them to GitHub's project tools for a similar tool like Trello? Add comment. And so I won't be approving this pull request today because there's something that I feel at least strongly enough that, hey, we should consider changing this. And then the developer who wrote the code, I should ignore that says it was me, but the developer who wrote the code can reply to my comment on their code and say, hey, we still implant, they might give a justification or they'll remove that and sort of resolve my concern. Once my concerns are resolved and I feel like this is good, I can, where is the approve button? I probably can't approve it because I'm the developer here. Or maybe I'm just not finding it right. Well, I'll be giving this sort of demonstration of the whole pull request process several times. We'll actually have more lecture on it. Yes?
Just scroll down a little bit and set merge pull request.
So I don't want to do that because that's going to add it to the code base. That might be where I can, no. So yeah, if we click this, this will add the code changes, yeah. So
that's different than approving it?
correct. Approving is just saying like, hey, I think this is good to go. Yeah. Great question though. So yeah, that's just sort of calling out the difference between approving it is not the same thing as it being added to the code base. Yeah, so I'm a little bit more familiar with GitLab, but yeah, I'll give a better demo of this next lecture, and we'll just get more and more familiar with this whole new workflow of using pull requests and stuff like that. Yeah, so there's also another branch in here called initial Java code that there is not a pull request about yet. And so that's probably what we'll demo next week. If you all want to see this, I'll post the project in the chat. We'll see if I actually build a full-size project by the end of this course or not. That depends on a lot of things. Cool. Let's go ahead and run through this last bullet point right here. I want to demo creating a new branch, making changes, and then opening up a pull request, so that side of it. So I'm at the home page on the code tab. This is, if you open up the project, this is where you'll be. This drop down is the branches. And so it's a little bit confusing knowing how to create a branch because it's, you just type the name of it and press enter. At least to me, because I'm used to other tools. All right, so I'm going to create a branch called lecture example. Press enter. Press enter. Press this, yeah. See if it makes it confusing. All right, cool. So I just created a branch called lecture example. This exists on GitHub. It does not exist on my laptop yet because I prefer using the terminal or a terminal for this. I'm going to say git pull on project. And I can see here that we have a new branch called lecture example. So I will say git checkout lecture example. And now I can even see right here, I'm on this lecture example branch. Okay? So I'm going to make the tiniest change. Let's say, this is my original one. Yes, it does. Let's just say I will change, once again, entering into the thinking stage, I would say McDev was here. Okay, that's fine. All right, so git status to see what file changes there are. I'm going to go, I don't want to add the changes to build.gradle, Gradle, so I'll say git add src. Git status. I can see I've only prepared these files, or this file, for saving, so now I'll save it, say git commit -m, and I'll say added a. Then finally, I need to send this up to GitHub. So what I can do is say git push. All right, so now my changes have been added to GitHub. I have this pop-up window right here. Let's see if I still have it. Yeah. Because I just added changes to this branch, GitHub is going to be helpful. It's going to say, hey, you just added changes to this. You want to create a pull request. So I'll just press that button. And I can say, I just added some comments, but I think they are really important. Great pull request. So this was the beginning of the discussion, and I think I may have done something wrong when I created the branch because there is a lot of changes here. So this is not what I intended to demo, but I think this is a very useful thing to show what went wrong here. If you notice, I only changed one file, and I only committed that one file. However, I have a bunch of files here that seem to have been changed. So let's rewind a bit and go back to when I first created this branch. So I created, I'll say, lecture sample 2. Let's see here. I believe when I was on this page last time, it didn't say to create it from main. It said to create it from the other branch that I was on. Give me a second here. So if I switch the main drop down to this branch, and then I try to create a branch, example branch. You'll notice it says to create it from this initial Java code branch. So we will definitely revisit this, but it's worth emphasizing while we have the example here. So if you remember, the API developer mentioned that they created, they used the Spring initializer to create all of this, the initial code for the project. Well, all of that new code lives on this initial Java code branch. And when I created my branch, I created it off of the branch with the new code. And so I sort of inherited all those code changes. It would have been much better if I started off from the main branch and then created my branch. So if you didn't catch anything there, what went wrong, what went right, we'll have more exposure to it, and we'll fumble through it a little bit here and there. But the main takeaway is when we're creating a branch, it's useful to start off to be aware of what branch you're starting from. And typically, we're going to start off from the main branch, or depending on how our project we choose to structure it, we're going to say, hey, we're going to do everything off the dev branch. But yeah, same concept. Cool. So lastly here, we're going to have Studio. I don't know how much time we'll have to discuss this. I wanted to discuss a bit about, we're about to decide what we're going to build. This is a really important step. It's flexible, we can modify it as we need to. However, some of y'all are probably going to discuss using a UI framework like React. That's cool, it's a very ambitious goal. What I want to outline for y'all is what that will entail, like further down for your project. So, if you were to build the project using, Timeleaf and sort of the stuff we use in Unit 2, that's going to be a more predictable path and a lighter lift in terms of accomplishing it. If we do something new, which is cool, like incorporating React, it's going to, one, require that we learn React. Okay. And then two, it's going to change the underlying structure of the application. So instead of having that controller talking to Timeleaf, generating this, returning this templates, we're going to need to create an API. And so we'll have a separate, if you choose to go with that, we'll have a separate Java application that's just providing data, and then you'll have a separate React or Angular or whatever application, and they're running independently. So this is going to add, in my opinion, this will add more challenges when it comes to just implementing them as a create an API. This will also create more challenges when dealing with the security, the two applications talking to each other. It's a little bit easier if it's all contained within one app. And so the moral of the story, if there is one, the moral of the story is that I don't want to discourage anyone from taking on the challenge of departing quite a ways away from the type app we built at the end of this last unit. I don't want to discourage anyone from doing that. Just know that if we go down this path, or if your team goes down this path, it's going to be a substantial amount of effort to complete that. So if you're up for the challenge, more power to you. I just don't want you to enter into that blindly, right? So for Studio, important to be decisive. Decide on project. So you'll set up your Git repo. Remember, we only have about a month and a half. And finally, be aware of imposter syndrome. Everyone who is in this room, I have confidence, has the ability to make very significant contributions to your apps. It's really easy for me to, for every developer I've worked with, it's really easy to get in our own heads and think, everyone I'm working with, they're the experts, I'm just sort of tagging along. But just know you all, the fact that you're here, it's a tough course that you're here, so you can definitely contribute. So yeah, go forth, deciding your projects, be decisive, good luck.